Dracula, Chapter 13, pages 195 to 206. Dr. Seward's diary continued. The funeral was arranged for the next day so that Lucy and her mother might be buried together. I took care of all the horrible details. Before turning in, Van Helsing and I went together to look at poor Lucy. The undertaker had certainly done his work well. There was a wilderness of beautiful white flowers. When the professor and I looked at Lucy's face, we were both startled by its beauty. All Lucy's loveliness and more had come back to her in death. I absolutely could not believe that I was looking at a corpse. The professor looked stern. He said to me, "Stay until I return," and left the room. He came back with a handful of wild garlic from the box waiting in the hall and placed the flowers among the others on the bed. Then he took a little gold crucifix from around his neck and placed it over Lucy's mouth. He came to my room that night. "Tomorrow, before dark, I want you to bring me a set of surgical knives." "Must we do an autopsy?" I asked, surprised. "Yes and no. I want to operate, but not as you think. I want to cut off her head and take out her heart." "Ah, John, you are a surgeon, and yet you look so shocked. But I must not forget, my dear friend, that you loved her. And I do not forget, for I am the one who will operate, and you will not help. I would like to do it tonight, but for Arthur's sake, I must not. It will be free after his father's funeral tomorrow, and he will want to see her. Then, when she is in her coffin, ready for burial, you and I shall come when everyone else sleeps. We shall unscrew the coffin lid, do our operation, and then replace the lid so that no one knows but you and me." But why? The girl is dead. Why mutilate her poor body? This is monstrous." He put his hand on my shoulder and said with great tenderness, "John, I pity your poor bleeding heart. If I could, I would take it on myself, the sadness that you feel. But there are things that you do not know. When you do know them, you shall bless me for knowing them first. Did you ever know me to do anything without good reason? Isn't that why you sent for me when this horrible trouble began? Weren't you horrified when I would not let Arthur kiss his dying love? Yes, and yet you saw how she thanked me with her beautiful dying eyes. And didn't you hear me promise to continue to help her? You did. My friend, there are strange and terrible days ahead of us. I will need your faith and your help. Will I have them?" I took his hand and promised. As I watched him walk to his room, I saw one of the maids go silently along the hallway and into the room where Lucy lay. She had her back to me, so she did not see me watching her. I was touched by the girl's devotion to go sit alone with her poor dead mistress so that she would not be lonely. I must have slept well, for it was broad daylight when Van Helsing woke me up by coming into my room. He came over to my bedside and said, "Don't bother about the knives. We shall not do it." "Why not?" I asked. "Because," he said sternly, "it is too late, or too early. See?" Here he held up a little golden crucifix. "This was stolen in the night." "Stolen?" I asked in wonder. "Then how do you have it?" "Because I got it back from the worthless maid who stole it from the dead. Now we must wait." He went away, leaving me with a new puzzle to think of. When Arthur arrived, he looked terribly sad and broken. I knew he had loved his father very much, and to lose him and Lucy in the same week was a bitter blow. I led him to the room where Lucy lay and left him at the door, feeling that he would want to be alone with her. But he took my arm and led me in, saying huskily, "You loved her too, old fellow. She told me all about it. And your friendship was precious to her. I don't know how to thank you for all you have done. I can't think yet." And here he suddenly broke down, threw his arms around my shoulders, crying, "Oh, Jack, what will I do? There is nothing in the wide world for me to live for." I comforted him as well as I could, as men do, without many words. I stood still, my arm around him, until his sobs died away, and then I said softly to him, "Come and look at her." Together we moved over to her. God, how beautiful she was. Every hour seemed to be making her lovelier. It frightened and amazed me, and as for Arthur, he began to tremble. At last, after a long pause, he said in a faint whisper, "Jack, is she really dead?" I promised him sadly that she was, and after kneeling by the bed for a while and looking at her lovingly, he turned to go. I reminded him that this was goodbye, since the coffin would be fastened down next. He went back and took her dead hand and kissed it, and bent to kiss her forehead. He came away, fondly looking back over his shoulder at her. We ate dinner together, and I could see that poor Art was trying to make the best of things. Van Helsing had been silent all through dinner, but when we had lit our cigars, he began to speak to Arthur. "Now, Lord Godalming," for since the death of his father, Arthur had that title. But Arthur interrupted him. No, don't call me that, for God's sakes, not yet anyway. Forgive me, sir. I don't mean to be rude. It is only because my loss is so recent." The professor answered kindly. "I wasn't sure whether I should or not, but I cannot call you Mr. when I have grown to know you as Arthur." Arthur held out his hand and took the old man's warmly. "Call me whatever you want," he said, "as long as you will call me your friend. And let me say that I cannot thank you enough for your goodness." He paused a moment and went on. "I know that Lucy understood your goodness even better than I do. If I ever seem to doubt you, you must forgive me. Please believe that I trust you in every way. You are Jack's friend, and you are hers." The professor cleared his throat a couple of times, as though about to speak, and finally said, "May I ask you something now?" "Certainly." "Did you know that Mrs. Westenra left you all her property?" "No, poor dear, this is the first I have heard of it," Arthur replied. "Since it is all yours, you have a right to do whatever you want with it. I am asking you to give me permission to read all Miss Lucy's papers and letters. Believe me, I am not merely curious. I have a reason of which she would approve. I have them all here. I took them before we knew that all was yours, so that no stranger might read her words and look into her soul. If you will allow me, I shall keep them. Even you may not see them yet, but I shall keep them safe, and in good time I shall give them back to you. It is a hard thing that I ask, but will you do it, for Lucy's sake?" Arthur answered heartily, like his old self, "Dr. Van Helsing, do what you like. Lucy would want you to. I shall not bother you with questions until the time comes." The old professor stood up, saying solemnly, "Thank you. There will be pain for us all, but it will not be all pain. We all will have to pass through the bitter water before we reach the sweet. But we must be brave and unselfish and do our duty, and all will be well." I slept on a sofa in Arthur's room that night. Van Helsing did not go to bed at all. He walked endlessly, as if he were a night watchman. He was never out of sight of the room where Lucy lay in her coffin, covered with the wild garlic flowers, which sent a heavy, overpowering smell through the odor of lily and rose and into the night. Mina Harker's Journal, September 22nd. In the train to Exeter. Jonathan is asleep. Mr. Hawkins' service was very simple. It was only Jonathan and me, the servants, one or two friends of his from Exeter, and a few friends from the legal world. Jonathan thought it would interest me to sightsee in London a little. We walked down Piccadilly for a bit, and then I was looking at a very beautiful girl in a big hat sitting in a carriage outside a dress shop, when I felt Jonathan clutch my arm so tight that he hurt me. He said under his breath, "My God!" I turned to him quickly and asked him what was the matter. He was very pale, and his eyes seemed to be bulging out of his head. I saw that he was staring at a tall, thin man with a great beak of a nose, black mustache, and pointed beard. He, too, was looking at the pretty girl, so hard that he did not notice either of us. I did not like his face. It was hard and cruel, with unnaturally red lips that made his pointed white teeth even more noticeable. Jonathan kept staring at him until I was afraid he would notice. I asked Jonathan again why he was disturbed, and he answered, "Don't you see who it is?" "No, dear," I said, "I don't know him. Who is it?" It is the man himself, he said. The poor man was obviously terrified. I believe that if he hadn't been leaning on me, he would have collapsed. He kept staring. A man came out of the shop with a parcel and gave it to the lady, who then drove off. The dark man kept his eyes on her and moved off in the same direction. Jonathan kept staring after him. He said as if to himself, I believe it is the Count, but he has grown young. My God, how could it be? Oh my God, if only I knew. He was so upset that I didn't want to make him worse by asking him questions, so I remained silent. We walked a little further, and then we went in and sat for a while in a park. It was a hot day for autumn, and there was a seat in a shady place. After a few minutes staring at nothing, Jonathan's eyes closed, and he went to sleep with his head on my shoulder. In about 20 minutes he woke up and said to me quite cheerfully, Why, Mina, have I been asleep? How rude of me. Come, let's get a cup of tea somewhere. He had forgotten all about the stranger. I worry about these lapses of memory. I worry about everything. I must learn what happened on his journey. The time has come, I am afraid, when I must open the notebook and know what is written there. Oh, Jonathan, I know you will forgive me. It is for your own sake. Later. A sad homecoming in every way. The house is empty of the dear man who was so good to us. Jonathan is still pale and dizzy, and now a telegram from a Dr. Van Helsing, whoever he may be. I am sorry to inform you that Mrs. Westenra died 5 days ago, and that Lucy died the day before yesterday. They were both buried today. Oh, what a weight of sorrow is in such few words. Poor Mrs. Westenra, poor Lucy, and poor Arthur, to have lost such sweetness out of his life. God help us bear our troubles. Dr. Seward's diary, September 22nd. It is all over. Arthur has gone back to his home and has taken Quincy Morris with him. What a fine fellow Quincy is. I believe that he suffered as much about Lucy's death as any of us, but he never broke down. Van Helsing is lying down, resting before his journey. He goes to Amsterdam tonight, but says he will return tomorrow night. Poor old fellow, the strain of the past week has broken even his iron strength. So for now, we are scattered in all directions. Lucy lies in the tomb of her family, a noble tomb in a lonely churchyard, away from busy London. And with this I finish this diary, and God only knows if I shall ever begin another. If I do, or if I even open this again, it will be to write about different people and different themes. The Westminster Gazette, A Hampstead Mystery, A Boofful Lady, September 25th. The residents of Hampstead are nervous about the safety of their children. During the past 2 or 3 days, several toddlers have briefly disappeared from their homes. In all these cases, the children were too young to explain what had happened, but all have mentioned being with someone that, in their childish way, they refer to as a boofful lady. It has always been here in the evening when they have disappeared. On 2 occasions, the children have not been found until early the next morning. When the first child who disappeared was found, he explained that he had gone for a walk with a beautiful lady. Perhaps the other children picked up the phrase and are using it as they play hide and seek. There is, however, a serious side to the question. The children who have been missing have been found in a very minor wound to the throat. The wounds seem such as might be by a rat or a small dog. Local police are keeping a sharp lookout for stray children. The Westminster Gazette, The Boofful Lady, Another Child, September 25th, special edition. Another child, missing since last night, was discovered late this morning in a deserted area of Shooter's Hill. The little boy has the same tiny wound in the throat and has been noticed in other cases, but his injury was more serious than that of the others. He seemed extremely weak. Once he had rested, he too told of being lured away by a boofful lady.